Saikira, Kannan, welcome to Weird Sauce, and thank you for welcoming us from your location, I believe, in India. Could you kindly introduce yourself for our audience in Weird Sauce?
Yeah, thanks, Florence. So this is Saikiran Kannan. I'm basically an Indian, and one of my passions is, to report very interesting stories from across the globe. I also do a bit of investigative journalism, and it's not limited to any particular area. So it could range from COVID-19 to counterterrorism to the Taliban or Afghanistan. A range of stories. And journalism is not my full-time profession. I also have another profession outside of this, but this is one of my biggest passions that I'm pursuing right now.
And so, to give you a little bit of context as to how we met and what's the context of this conversation. So, I followed, obviously, during the pandemic, the story that was unfolding in front of us, as millions of people were. And being based in Singapore, I was trying to find out basically what was the origin of this pandemic. And a lot of information was on social media, particularly on Twitter. And I came across somebody that was anonymous at the time, and I still think anonymous, called the Seeker, and he was doing a lot amongst a group of people. I mean, there's not just him, but there was a group of people who were very interested in finding out the origin of this pandemic and the origin of the virus, both in terms of the genetic and medical implication, as well as the implication perhaps in other fields. So walk us through basically, and this is how we met indirectly. So walk us through basically what led you to be interested in that story from perhaps other stories that you were covering when you were based in Singapore before going to India.
Right. I think as soon as COVID-19 struck the globe, this was something that the world had not experienced at all, right? So we're talking about the Spanish flu, that was almost a century ago. So there's something that the world was totally taken aback with, and they were totally caught unawares. So there was this very important question that kept cropping up in all of our people's mind, that what is this and what's happening? How come this has never happened before, right? So I think the first and foremost thing that all of us would think when something that is totally unimaginable happens is that, is this a conspiracy? Is there something really called COVID-19? Because I think a lot of politicians, even across the globe, initially, raised suspicion that this is not something to be worried about. It's just a propaganda or something like that. And also the fact that the global political space was also kind of lopsided when this thing happened, because China was already having issues with countries. You had someone like Donald Trump at the helm of affairs in the US. And India was as the largest democracy in the world. They were having a lot of confrontations, militarily, and in their borders with China. So when we say that something like this has originated in China, I think it's coming out naturally. We've had a lot of a lot of stories even before the outburst of COVID that China could possibly, do something drastic that would probably change the world forever altogether. So the conspiracy theories is how, this thing really started off with. I don't think that anyone would have known for sure that, it was China or whatnot. Even now, I'm just saying, based on the evidence that we've had, that there's a strong suspicion. Of course, none of us can, categorically or, say it with 100% certainty that, China was, well aware of what it was doing, or, it was the place where COVID-19 the virus per se was, purposely, manufactured in a lab and, purposely let out. So that's not something that any one of us can say 100%. But there were a lot of suspicion with regards to what China was doing, how their Wuhan Institute of Virology, was functioning. So there was a lot of things for people who followed that news. But outside of it, the general public or even journalists per se, they were constantly looking for something that could help them point fingers at China. It's just that coincidentally, when people start looking in a place and they are not sure, but and they have suspicions for various other reasons, but it was just a coincidental thing that whatever evidence that we have unearthed right now, thanks to drastic, thanks to people like Saikir and many of the other scientists like Mona Rahalkar from Maharashtra, India. So these are the people who had a hunch and they followed the hunch and they were able to unearth a lot of evidences. So I think that's how the story unfolded. None of us knew for sure this was going to turn out the way it is. I think people are still getting all of their efforts put into publishing more and more evidences so that China is made to answer or at least made to acknowledge that these things exist. But I think that's how it started. None of us knew how this would turn out. It's just that as journalists, people or and anyone who's interested in fact finding, they just have a hunch and they follow it. It could have been a case that nothing was ever found in terms of evidence that that points to things that went wrong with WIV or with regards to how China suppressed information. So, but yeah, I think that's how it panned out.
So this group of people that you mentioned, for the audience that doesn't know who the seeker is, not as his name, but rather who as a personality and what did he do, and this group Drastic, which is it's very famous on Twitter, but it might not be famous to people who are listening. So could you explain to us how you came across them, and particularly the seeker, and you sort of then got involved in the whole story, and then we can sort of take a dive upwards and basically start making sense of what that story means for us humans in general.
Yeah. So firstly, I would like to say how these people came together. I think that is that is very important. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I think that's a very, very important and very interesting story. So whenever we have a story wherein which there are a couple of fact finders, they unearth something. The first thing that is used as an argument against them is that probably they have some hidden agenda, or rather their viewpoints are so skewed and biased that it should not be taken seriously, right? Especially with respect to a situation as sensitive as what COVID-19 was and is. But here is a group of people. They came together. The group of people includes scientists, doctors, physicians, journalists, and just average a normal person like you or me or anyone who are not even at least I can tell for myself, I'm not a full-time journalist, but just normal average earthlings, right? So I think Saikir is the perfect example for obvious reasons. He has his he maintains his anonymity, and he maintains I mean by now I think all of us know that he's from India, but I'm not even going to reveal which part of India he's from. Some of you may already know, but for obvious reasons. But he's a very good person. He's a very good guy. I know he's a guy for certain because I've spoken to him, but yeah, he's a very good person who is just an average he was just an average student, right? So he was not a fact finder kind of a person who was doing it for, professional reasons. He's not a journalist per se. But all of these people came together and, they basically complemented each other. Where, it again boils down to the point that I said, somewhere down the line, all of them had a hunch that there's something inorganic, unnatural about, COVID-19 as a virus, the way the way it exists, the way it transforms itself, the way it spreads. So there was something inorganic rather about it. So they all of them got together, tried to see the evidence at hand in terms of how the virus was initially behaving, and tried to see whether there's something that is not being revealed by China, or even WHO for that matter. So that's how their journey started, and under the name of Drastic. So I've spoken to numerous people ever since, but it's a very, very funny story in terms of how I first got in touch with Seeker. He was my gateway towards getting in touch with the rest of the members of Drastic. So I think it was March 2020, around that time, when the entire world is just facing the COVID-19 outrage, if you'd like to call, and everyone's wondering what's happening, what is the rationale behind such a virus. I mean, what is the origin? Earlier, the first thing that we knew was we were told that it was the Hunan seafood market, right? So people were like, this market's existed for years, and why all of a sudden this is happening? Or is it even possible that this just a simple virus from this area can actually ravage across the globe, right? So first, the world thought that it was just China's problem, and then the world thought it was probably just Asia's problem, and then what happened. I think the world only took it seriously when the US started getting affected, and then of course Europe was ravaged by the virus. So the evolution of it was the seriousness was not there. But me, who constantly travels between India and Singapore, and I know the influence of China, be it with regards to people, culture, and whatnot. It's like we in Singapore we get like thousands of tourists coming from China, and that was exactly the time of Chinese New Year. So it was a no-brainer for me to be very careful. So incidentally, I was probably one of the very, very early early persons to start wearing an N95 mask from India to Singapore. I traveled on Jan 20th or something. It's and when the COVID-19 outbreak was, right? It was, the world came to know it at the end of December. But given my journalistic passions, I was always following what was happening in China. So I read the signs much earlier than any of my family members or friends did. So even on Jan 20th, I was wearing a mask. I was wearing a double mask rather, from Bangalore to Singapore. And even when I reached Singapore, many people saw me with suspicion, or they were wondering what is the problem. It was not even that time of the year where we have this haze problem coming in from Indonesia. So people were wondering why this mask and all of that. And then I think a few days later, Singapore got its first COVID-19 patient. It was a traveler from China. So I was always following what was happening in China, and it was quite remarkable to see the number of patients, number of people dying in China. That was quite remarkable in terms of the lockdowns that they were enforcing. So it was kind of not scary, but it made me sit up and take notice, and it made me be serious in terms of what this could mean if if it were to escape out of China, go to other places. So this made me want to read more and more. So I basically wanted to know the origin of the virus and the behavioral patterns of the virus in terms of what are the symptoms, how can we protect ourselves, and what happens if one is infected, etc., etc. So that made me talk to a lot of people, a lot of doctors who themselves were, caught unaware, and they were also equipping themselves with more information from their, colleagues from across the world, especially China. So these things kept on happening. Then, we saw more and more countries getting affected, etc. That only made me more eager and, anxious rather to, find out more. I was never following this story with a thought process of probably doing a story on the origins, or, probably because like I said, I never knew that I'd find the wealth of information I did. It is just pure curiosity that drove me, towards, talking and interacting with more people, trying to figure out, what's going to happen to the world, etc., etc. And I think by the time I met Seeker, I think it was pretty well established that, China is behind this, or probably there's something that they hid from the rest of the world early on, which possibly could have saved, thousands of lives, if we were alerted much earlier, or, if we knew how to deal with this kind of a virus. But again, that was again a thought that many people had, including journalists or politicians, or etc. But there was no strong evidence to suggest that indeed that was the case. So then I was also told by India Today, with whom I freelance. So they were also interested, given that I've already been interacting with a lot of physicians and stakeholders who were concerned with COVID-19 across the world. So they knew that I was following this very closely. So they said that there could be a very interesting story out there. If we get something in terms of what possibly could have been, or what actually happened prior to China finally admitting that there's a virus on the loose, and the COVID-19 situation eventually becoming a pandemic, right, by WHO. So yeah, that was in the back of my mind. So I was speaking to a lot of people, and I think somewhere down the line, this person Seeker, he found that there's this guy who is going around talking to people and etc., etc. So he felt that probably he should reach out to me. So one fine day I just get I see a person following me, that's Seeker. I didn't know about Seeker before, and then he asked me directly that are you on the lookout for something, because by then I had some hearsays telling me that there are some things that China suppressed, and there are some traceable evidences based on which we can unearth more, or try to report that itself as a big story. So he knew what I was looking for. So he reached out to me and he said that what, we actually have an entire group of people working on the COVID origins case, or the history of the virus, and what WIV has been doing in terms of researching different viruses, manufacturing, or rather playing with viruses in their lab, and there is a strong chance that one of them could have escaped the lab. So I was very interested in what he said. I was also very interested in who all were involved with Drastic, and I just wanted to hear more and more from him. So that is when he put me in touch with this doctor couple from Maharashtra, India. So they're basically from Pune, and they've been doing a lot of research, and they did some amazing work in terms of tracing the origins of COVID-19, and also coming out with strong evidences which point to the fact that China may have seen similar viruses in the past, much before, as early as probably a decade ago. I think these were very interesting findings, and that's when I really dug in. And the more I spoke to them, the story just kept getting bigger and bigger. I think.
And can I just interrupt you for a minute? What category of evidence are we talking about? Is it like phylogenetic evidence? Were they involved in genetically sequencing the viruses and all its mutation, and in order to find this grade of evidence, or are we talking about other type of evidence like databases and so on?
Yes, I mean it was actually everything. If you talk about So this person, this lady, Dr. Mona from Pune. So she did a lot of fact finding in terms of previous outbreaks in China, which were of a similar nature to COVID-19, but they were not as they were not in a large scale as what we saw with regards to COVID-19. But they involved symptoms in patients which were very similar to COVID-19. So this is where it takes us down to one of the caves in China, which had a lot of bats, and there was a lot of mining activities going on nearby, and where a few miners were they fell sick within a week of working there, and eventually all of them died. I think barring one, all of them died. So these were like 5 to 6 miners who were infected in one of the caves that they were working in. So what Mona did basically, she went through, along with seekers, they both went through hundreds and thousands of research papers and documents that were published in China, and most of them were in Mandarin. So they also had to painfully translate them into English and, find out if there were any similarities to what we were seeing right now in terms of COVID. And that's when they found this case wherein which, these miners were infected and their medical records were unearthed. And whatever symptoms that they were facing, and their X-ray reports, etc., were like absolutely 95 to 98% similar to what we were seeing right now, or rather, in mid 2020 with regards to COVID-19. That was a very critical piece of evidence, in the sense that there was this case which already happened in China years ago, and it was starkly similar to COVID-19. So I think in my story, if you'd have seen, we would have also given a comparison in terms of symptoms and in terms of how patients suffered, and in terms of also the behavior of the virus in both the cases with regards to COVID-19 and that earlier outbreak. So this was a very important piece of evidence unearthed. Secondly, we also came across, again thanks to Drastic and a lot of other freelancers who pitched in with a lot of evidence, that months before China officially accepted that there was a spread of COVID-19, etc., there were a lot of evidence even prior to that, in terms of what happened around WIV, in terms of how they started disposing medical waste, in terms of how they suddenly started ordering a lot of masks, which were specifically made, in terms of fighting a viral outbreak. Many things like this, and even in terms of how Taiwan, the Taiwanese intelligence circles, they keep very close tabs with China, in terms of what's happening in China? Is there some chatter that could probably give them some hints in terms of how China is behaving with Taiwan, etc., etc. So they keep a very close watch, and they picked up a lot of chatter much before China made it official, in terms of what was happening in the Chinese health department, and what was being discussed in terms of a possible outbreak, etc. So it was not just about looking at the structure of the COVID-19 variant and saying that this was well known even before it was made official. But there was a lot of things that happened, like I just told you. So these have been documented in the story. But these are not just hearsays. So you have specific sources attributed to each one of these pointers. I think all of these together gave us a very fair idea of what possibly could have happened. Like I said, none of us can be 100% sure, but there were enough for us to take note of and start questioning China in terms of their early handling of this viral outbreak, and how it could have been prevented from affecting the rest of the world. Had there been more transparency, and had there been a more powerful WHO, and and had there been some kind of accountability and responsibility from the Chinese side.
So I'm hearing this, and I think some other people will hear different things, but I'm hearing basically, and I started hearing this story on the Dark Horse podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with that podcast with Brett Weinstein, where he started talking about they started talking about the strange genetic look of this virus sequence, including furin inclusion in it. Then they started talking about this progeny of the virus, saying that, of course, something in I believe it's Hunan cave, that the episode that you talked about of these miners who some of them died and some of them presented with very similar symptoms. So there's a lot of things that went on over the months that were unearthed, like disappearance of databases that were otherwise used for scientific publication, etc. The thing that I'd like to ask you now is, so you get involved with this, you dig in, you think there are a plethora of evidence of different nature that could be put together. What was your goal in it? So your goal is so that we have stronger institution, so that the public knows what's going on, and perhaps we can stop it now if we didn't stop it then. What was your hope and your intellectual goal in this? Because it's such a huge story, and by the time that you get it, it's already on its way. So what goal did you have in doing what you did?
Personally, for me, so it was very interesting. It's a good question, and I'd again like to take a step back and tell you a little story between me and Seeker. So when I first met, spoke to Seeker, he reached out to me, and then he put me in touch with a lot of people, part of the drastic research. And when I got all this information, and then I started to put them together, I didn't know firstly how to write this story. Should I write it as in parts, or should it be just one big story so that it doesn't lose its potency, or the importance, like people just take note of it, and because nowadays even telling a story, sometimes people lose interest because there's something else that's coming in every single day. So I just wanted people to take notice of this amazing work put together by these scientists, and they also need to know the seriousness of what's been happening. So it took me some time to put this story together and stuff. Then I was also so then it was published and stuff, and then I was just having a casual conversation with Seeker, and then I asked him, it just made me ask him that given that they had been doing this work for months until, I got in touch with him, I was wondering why, this story was not out anywhere else. At least in India, I was the first person to break the story, at least in Asia, I would say. A few publications in Europe, and I think in Europe they were the first ones to publish these stories, but none of them in the Asian circles. And the first thing that Saikir told me is he'd actually tried getting this information out, put out in the open, but a few of the journalists houses, or a few of the media persons that he reached out to, they just didn't understand what the story was all about, and they didn't understand the potential it carried, and basically they didn't understand the significance of this overall findings. I think that was a very difficult thing to hear for me, because these were very, very significant in terms of findings. So I think that made me feel very surprised, but at the same time I was happy that I could kind of do justice to put this out in the open and not try to sensationalize, rather, but just put out the facts out there. It's for people to kind of interpret it or perceive it the way they want to be, because the story would sell itself if it's solid enough. And I felt this was solid enough. And what I also realized from speaking to these people, these people are doing it for they were not doing it for money or anything, because I didn't pay Saikir anything in return for all his help. I spoke to so many people, like doctor cum scientists like Alina Chan, who's in US. She works for the MIT Broad Institute. But people who are anonymous like Saikir, and people like Monar Halkar from Pune. So they're all there in this for one reason, and that is to get the facts out there and somewhere push China towards some kind of an accountability or responsibility for whatever that has happened. I think it's very easy to say that whatever has happened, but all these people were looking to pursue this case only in the interest of the entire planet, entire world, you and me, because we don't want a situation similar to what has transpired right now, have occurring in the future. And, I think they want this, I think they want to set some precedents, whereby, we kind of attach some kind of accountability to China, so that this becomes a precedence in itself, for any of the future outbursts, outbreaks that, we may have. Hopefully not, but I think that's very, very important also in terms of aligning the medical community, the WHO and the international governments, in terms of also imposing a sense of responsibility and accountability, with regards to China. I think that was their sole interest in this, not to sensationalize this, not to, fix China as an accused or a perpetrator, but rather ensure that such a kind of thing doesn't happen tomorrow, or anywhere else in the future. I think that also boils down to the introduction of a lot of transparency. I think if countries are going to pursue their own experiments and their own research on the lines of WIV, I think they should also do that with a lot of responsibility and transparency. If China was transparent with what WIV was doing, I think at least the medical fraternity and the scientist fraternity would not have been caught so unaware, and they would not have wasted precious moments in reacting to a situation like this. So in that sense, my self-interest in telling this story was firstly to put this story out, because this story had to be told, and I was very surprised that others before me did not feel that way. Secondly, it was just my bit of, an assistance, or rather, it was just my bit, to the drastic research group, and, all of these people, selfless people, to help tell their story outside and, create a platform for them. And I think I succeeded in what I wanted to do. So that was my sole interest in this story.
So there's two things that I found quite stunning in what you said. So number one, something which is the order of the mechanistic approach to finding out what happened. So what I mean by this is, it seems to me that this event has illustrated the only counterpower that at least average people like myself had access to was due to chance and the dedication of random people. By random, I don't mean in terms of quality. I mean in terms of randomness, as in they decided to associate themselves on the spot. So basically, our feed of information, parallel to any narrative that was global, only came at a fluke, was not actually organized. There wasn't an entity out there. And that is the counterpower that we are left with. So
Absolutely.
That in one way is extremely shocking, because the medical and the scientific community, you mentioned them, it seemed that we talk about China, but it seems that there's a lot of countries involved in this, because China did what it did, but it seems that America had some part in this. It seems that Europe had some part in this. It seems that Australia. In any case, it's a consortium of events at such a scale that we have to take back and imagine that this is not just a Chinese issue, that this was a conglomerate issue, whatever the size of the conglomerate, and however many actors were in there. What I'm really stunned about is the fact that in 2020 and 2021, we are left with this side of counterpower that is so small and so unorganized by will that we ought to wonder what's happened to our institutions, to our journalistic integrity and investigative journalism that we thought, at least we, the West, thought we had. And why is it that within the scientific community, we are left with dissident or people who are prepared to sabotage their career that are there as a counterpart? Why is it that there hasn't been a fraternity? You use the term fraternity in science to say, what we've always done before is we took a step back. We went into understanding how did we get here in order to understand what do we do next. For some reason, in this particular pandemic, this did not happen, and it did not happen not out of an accident. It did not happen as a decision. And so as a journalist, I would like you to think about, try to inform me as to why do you think this happened? Because if going forward, we have a next disaster, whatever that disaster is, public health or otherwise, and the only thing that we can hope to have is a group of people willing to sabotage their career or willing to spend copious amount of their own time, effort, money to reach out to the rest of us, then we're not in a great spot. And so I want to hear what you think of that.
You hit the nail there. You are, I would say it as, I would say it in the same way as you've seen, that it was probably purely accidental that, we have this wealth of information right now, so that, we are even in a position to ask the right questions. So what if we didn't even have these findings, or, these documents unearthed by, this group of people? We would not even know what kind of questions to ask. Where do we start? And you're also right about the fact that it's not just the functioning of, the transparency of China that we're trying to question or, set right, but it's also about countries like, USA and, a few countries in Europe who are equally culpable, especially with regards to what was happening in WIV. The average, member of this planet was not, aware of what was happening with regards to WIV, but certainly the governments did. And somewhere down the line, they should have, seen this coming, because if you're not going to have a sense of transparency in something, there are always chances that something might go wrong. And in some levels, whatever drastic the group of people have found out, I'm sure that at some level the respective governments would also have known at least a part of it. At least after the pandemic, the outbreak happened. So if these people would not have come forth and found these things, would this would we still be in this kind of a situation? I don't know. Probably not, because I'm not sure how many governments would have actually opened up their stance or found out these things to reveal to the public. I think that is where again and again the accountability and the transparency comes into play, because we had someone like Donald Trump who was very vocal about the outbreak early on, and he directly blamed China, but even he did not have any facts, right? It was just verbal diarrhea from most of his government people speaking against China, and that is not going to get us anywhere. I think only facts will matter at the end of the day, and these people came out with that. And yes, it is a very dangerous situation to think that had we not had these people getting us all this information, what would our situation would have been, or what does it seem like for our future, if we are not going to have a structured and an organized way of doing things and revealing things and being in sync. If governments going forward are going to continue with this kind of research and experiments, it could be China, it could be India, it could be Europe, anyone else, but I think they should all abide by a common code, wherein which every country knows at a high level at least what the other country is doing. I know that countries would also like to protect their secrets, protect their research work in terms of that it doesn't get copied, or they don't reveal too much to the other countries. But I think there has to be a sense of selflessness coming into this, and wherein which people work together for the betterment of this world rather than patenting things and whatnot. I think that's a whole other subject to discuss about. But I think at the end of the day, it has to be about also the WHO, which also has to claim a much larger part in whatever that's been happening, because the way WHO functioned, personally, I was not very, very happy in terms of how they dealt with China. And, in terms of their, early investigations, I think it was very, very shallow and high level for me. I think they wasted a lot of precious time in terms of how they could have clamped down on this. So in future, I would like the WHO to play a more prominent, role in terms of monitoring what's happening in terms of such kind of research. Or if the WHO is so incompetent, then the world countries can come together and form a new body for all we know. But it's all about getting countries to adhere to the common code that I'm talking about. I think that is very, very important, because we cannot have a situation in which one country's lack of responsibility of care, or carelessness, leads to every other country, suffering from that. I think that is what I feel in terms of what needs to be done.
Yes, and I think there is a temptation there when we deal with a story that is so big and has so many complex interrelated parts to apportion guilt immediately, linearly, simplistically. So to say, well, China is incompetent or corrupt or very dark or does not share stuff or disappear things, whatever. But the thing is, it's a little bit like when you look at a medical condition like addiction, a lot of people focus on the person that's addicted And a lot of the guilt often goes to them rather than the support network for the addicted. And by support network, I'm being very cynical. I mean the enablers, the people around who don't do anything to help, who don't stop it, who don't involve themselves. So the enablers, in the case of gain of function research, in the case of funding that gain of function research for either defense reasons or otherwise alleged creation of vaccines that we still don't have, etc. Whatever the purpose is, there's a lot of enablers around. And these enablers seem to have gone to some extent guilt-free compared to China, focus-free anyway. And I'm wondering that in this group of people that you speak with, is there anger? Because I've seen books coming out on the viral origin. You know, Alina Chen has gotten a book out. A few people are getting books out. Is this all we... I don't mean to demean it. I mean, great, some books are out, and I'm happy that they even got published because in these days of age, deplatforming and whatever. But is that all we've got, really? Is that all we can do is publish a book or scream on a podcast? Is that all we've got left to apportion understanding rather than guilt to what the heck is going on? I mean, these are serious stuff. So what do you think can be done above and beyond a book?
Well, again, yeah. I mean, again, it comes back to the point of the support system. I completely agree. So even many of the people that I spoke to, like I said, they were not interested to make China the villain here, though it is one of the key members of who were responsible for this kind of an outbreak. But it's definitely not China alone. Like you said, it's about people who invested and sponsored such researchers in WIV. It is about people who knew all along what was happening. That is both in terms of people in the private sector as well as people in the governments, including the US government. So all of a sudden, when such an outbreak happens, it's definitely not right to just alienate China and speak in a way that if you fix China, everything goes away. I don't think that's possible at all. It's just that China was willing to take these risks, but if China was saying, if China was to say no to such researchers, it could have happened in any part of the world. I think that's also very important. As long as you have the supply chain or the sponsors who are willing to invest in such kind of researchers, it's always going to happen. And probably at this minute that we are talking, probably there are researchers that probably pose greater danger that are happening in other parts of the world. We would never know until we have an accident of this kind. So that is that's something that we can't really control. But what we can definitely, I think in terms of when people write books, I think again they want a part of the story to be told, or some may even do it for commercial benefits. But I think one thing that we gotta agree is that this story needs to it needs to be told continuously and consistently. And I think we have to keep moving forward, try to unearth more findings, and keep asking the right questions. I think that's also a collective responsibility. It's not just about the people part of this drastic. It's not just about other fact finders. It's not about just journalists, but it's got to be people across walks of life, across spectrum, have to ensure that they look for some kind of accountability in whatever their governments do, and at least in terms of medicine, medicinal research, and the pharma industry, right? So it should. I'm not someone who opposes or even questions the presence of vaccines for COVID-19 or the subsequent variants that we're getting, but at the same time, it should not be a case where, like I said, China has to be accountable and responsible. It's the pharma companies themselves, they also need to show a sense of, accountability and transparency, wherein which, we are not, we are not continuing to add more booster doses, irrespective of whether, the new incoming variants need that or not, or, whether, the herd immunity takes over or whatnot. So I think this one incident of this COVID-19 outbreak should actually revolutionize both sides of the pharma industry. One is the research-oriented research-oriented space where, we try to experiment with new viruses and, see, if there's something like this is going to, help us in the future, or if something is going to, harm us in the future. So that's one part of the research. And second part of the research is, of course, the pharma industry benefiting from, such kind of, outbreaks. So we also need to ensure that there's an overall accountability across the spectrum. And like I said, these questions need to keep, getting asked. I think that is the only way, in some time in the future, that, there would be a standard set for every decision being made in terms of things that are concerning the pharma industry and the people in general. And at the same time, it will also be taken up as the minimum standard. So you keep asking the right questions, the new standards that are being set will be much higher than, what we have right now. So, yes, I think to answer your question, like, people have different ways of expressing. There's no one way, or, there's no right way or wrong way. It's just that, if the story spreads to more amount of people, I think somewhere down the line that will get each of them thinking, and, they'll probably ask the right questions, in turn, to their lawmakers in the future.
And to conclude this conversation that I think we could have for hours and hours on different aspects of this many narratives within that story, I would like to ask you as a journalist, so what do you think for yourself the future holds with this story and investigative journalism as a profession? Because here we are talking about fairly anonymous people. And the reason why they're anonymous, well, I let the audience just guess that if you're talking about subjects like this, imagine that you are genetically able to prove a certain amount of things, you're scientifically capable of explaining a certain amount of things. So I led to the imagination of the audience to respond as to why would these people want to be anonymous if it was risk-free, if it was embraced. I would right now be speaking with him. And we would be discussing this openly as other platforms have. So the question is for people to have a sense of fear and worry about their future, their career, their safety. For journalists like yourself to investigate such a subject that involves cross-national interest, that involves cross-field. So you're talking about medicine, public health, pharmaceuticals, finance, perhaps even politics, defense, national border, etc. Digital future of citizen, even. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What can we do? What do you think the future is for someone like you as an investigative journalism? Is there a future? And what can the audience everywhere in the world do to support locally their own network of people so that we never again remain disempowered, even if we're small? Because that's the thing that terrifies me, that individual human beings are disempowered from what they thought their rights was, and that these rights have disappeared in our front of our very eyes, and for democracy, that is simply unacceptable. And investigative journalism was one of our spear, and that spear seems to be disappearing. Our institutions, where are the spears? They seem to have been captured. So what can we do individually to help you guys to bolster these defenses?
Yeah. So I think I'll go back to the point that you were making. I think a couple of questions back, I think you asked me, right? Like in terms of you expressed your fear in terms of, what could have happened had these people not, accidentally chanced upon these findings, and what would have happened to our future then? And, what is that kind of a situation telling us? I think, like I said, it was a very scary thought to even think about what could have been had these findings not been out. But at the same time, I think if you were to take a lot of positives from that, it is that if there is will, we can always search for the truth to come out. I think the information that we have today is our biggest strength. Anyone could become a fact finder if he or she knows, how to search for something, what to search, and where to search. That is the space from where we have this term called OSINT, which is basically open source intelligence. So there's a lot of information out there which is open source. You don't need to pay. You don't have gateways that stop you from accessing those information. It is just that you need to know where it is stored. It's all free out there, and many of the information that these people unearthed, the Drastic Foundation unearthed, and even many of the information that I unearthed for various stories of mine, be it terrorism, counterterrorism, border fights or whatever, right? So there are plenty of them that are available as open source intelligence. It's just that we have to broaden our horizon and look for the right information. And for the second part of your question, in terms of how do people also be cognizant of the rule of the law, that is I think very, very important, because in this day and age, you can very easily be sued for the information that you're putting out on the internet. I think that's very, very important, that you are aware of journalistic ethics, journalistic rules. There are some rules that are not said, but you should also know in terms of what to do and what not to do. I think what not to do is the more tricky part. And especially if you're covering news, that pertains to different regions. Like, for example, I was doing a lot of reporting from Singapore. And sometimes I also did stories that were relevant to Singapore. And, we know Singapore has its own laws in terms of fake news and, what can be reported, etc. I think you will have to respect the rule of the land. At the same time, see, what stories can be told and what cannot be told. Of course, there are certain people who go completely anonymous in order to get everything out. So there are trade-offs that some people do, in which they do not touch the, very, very highly controversial points. Thereby, they manage to float with, their name out of the internet. I think so. That's someone like me. I'll probably not do a story that would force me to go anonymous. I think that's it. That's by my choice. But there are people that, who go anonymous because, they're dealing with very, very, very sensitive information, and, that could really come back to bite them. So I think it's a conscious decision that, one makes. But in terms of the future of the profession, or, even this as a passion, for me, it started off as a passion. I don't see this as a profession. Like I said, I do a 9 to 6 job in a totally different field. So this is basically where, I spend hours together to, fulfill and, to quench my thirst into the journalistic, passion that I have. So for me, it is about telling important stories, and more importantly, looking out for stories that, that can be told. So in terms of, that if people are having similar interests, I think the world is such a small place right now that, people, if they put their minds together and they have an internet connection, they can always reach out. I reached out to people that, I could never possibly have reached out to if there was no internet. And the world is also a small place in the sense that if you're looking for the right thing, and, there are always people that are out there to, help you with nothing, with nothing in return, right? They don't expect anything in return. So it's just about people helping out each other, it's a very positive thing if you see internet as a positive platform, but of course there are a lot of negatives as well. But yeah, I mean, I could reach out to a member of the Taliban from Singapore and India without having to ever go to Afghanistan. So that's how I do my stories, and I managed to get sound bites from people across the globe. It's about looking at the right place, finding the right sources, and trusting in your instincts. I think that's how it works for me.
So Saikiran, to conclude this conversation, I would like you to share with the audience what's your weird sauce for life, especially in times of pandemic.
I would say, what's a weird sauce? So I would say that, I don't know, I like to keep things simple. I'm not someone, again, yeah, of course, it's just my personal experience, but there was a time in my life that I used to plan a lot, much in advance, and many times most of the things did turn out the way I wanted it to be. So life kind of changed me into an instantaneous person, like a person who believes more in instincts rather than planning. So it also made me want to live life for that particular day. Of course, I would plan what I want to do today, but I'll probably not plan what I want to do today morning. I'll probably plan it to, later in the night, what I have to do tomorrow. So probably I plan for the next 12 hours that I have in my life. And if I'm accomplishing what I've planned for that 12 hours, I'm happy, because I like to take life one day, one day at a time. I think that's my weird sauce, and I think that kind of removes lots of chaos and complexity out of my mind, so that I'm just able to focus on that. Those 12 hours, it makes it much simpler for me. So I think that's one of my most favorite weird sauce, if I would say. Yeah.
Saikirans and Kannan, thank you very much for this time that you afforded us. And if people are interested in your work, we'll put some link in the episode. And I think as a sign-off, I would like to say that it's very hopeful to me to hear you say we can all become our own investigative journalists. And when the story matters that much to us and is so big, I think we all should. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Florence. It was a pleasure talking to you and sharing these things. Thank you.
If this conversation stopped you in your track, share it with your network. You never know whose life you might change for the better. Thank you for listening. Stay curious about our next guest, and stay curious about life.